Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Huddersfield South Social. I'm Marah. Joining me as always, the man from down under, Ian Kilroy, and in his cave somewhere with his nice big microphone, Cameron Pope. Also joining us this week is the former editor of Smile Well that never exists anymore, unfortunately. We'll get onto that much later in the programme, Sean O'Toole. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Hope we're all well. Huddersfield Town, a couple of games unbeaten, looking really, really solid. Went up against Preston North End. We mentioned on the last podcast that Preston could be a bit of a bogey team, and they ended up being a bogey team as the second half. 15 minutes of madness, really. Cost us in a 2-1 defeat with 2 goals from Alan Brown for Preston and a solitary goal for Town coming from Fraser Campbell in the first half. Contentious decision in regards to a red card, but we've been on the right end of one of those earlier in the season, so it was probably that second half madness that we're going to focus on first, because Naby Sarr ended up getting sent off. So all in all, an eventful game. Actually, probably a good watch for those of you who flogged 10 quid to watch on iFollow. But if you want to hear Daleks like Doctor Who, probably iPlayer was the way forward for you, gentlemen. What were we thinking on that? It was certainly an eventful game and probably worth that 10 quid if you were a fan that risked the all iFollow.
Well, it was, Greg. It was a good game. And we said on here in the previous episode that it wasn't going to be one for the purists, when in actual fact, it was certainly an entertaining affair. And okay, our excellent run of form has come to an end. And on balance, you could argue that the result was fair. It's been a while since we've been able to say that, but I think we were probably on the right end of a defeat. I thought we made a good account of ourselves, but Preston had more in the tank over 90 minutes. It's been great to see some of the Terrier spirit of old come flooding back, but I think we made a bit of a dog's dinner of this second half. 2 minutes of chaos changed the complexion of the game completely, and we've got to hand it to Preston. 2 class finishes from Alan Brown. It took them really well. However, they were facilitated by a comedy of errors. First instance, Bacuna is stood stock still in the box, doesn't pick up his man who's gone flying past him from about 3 yards behind, does recover in time to make the challenge, then trips over the ball in doing so, presents it straight to Alan Brown, and then, okay, it's a great finish from just inside the area. Well worthy of the equaliser. Moments later, clear breakdown in communication. The ball's coming in from the wing with height on it. If it's Ben Hamer's, he has to be shouting for that and punching clear. If it's Naby Sarr's, he has to be confident he can win that aerial battle and heading clear. If in doubt, Hamer's arriving at pace there. I think that's always the goalkeeper's ball, and Naby is stood plumbing his way, gets in the way. And again, of course, good finish from Brown. On another day, not both of those goals go in. You know, you could say there was a slice of luck. He was just in the right place at the right time for the second one. He was presented the ball by Bacuna for the first. But look, we've had the rub of the green in other games. For example, the draw at Rotherham. But that slice of luck just wasn't quite there at the end. And the most pertinent example of that is Pieper's effort off the post, which was, preceded just before by his touch from the keeper around the post to turn the previous shot. So, look, on the plus side, Campbell's showing excellent composure there in 8 minutes to finish when he's clearly losing his balance. Lewis O'Brien showing exactly what he brings to the team, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of that now that he's fit again. But yeah, I think on balance there, I don't think we can have too many complaints. The red card for me, it's an orange, isn't it? It's one of those, you see them giving, you see them not. I think it's fair to say it didn't change the complexion of the game because we actually played better with 10 men. We were more in the game. Didn't fully expect we were going to get an equaliser at the end of it. But, as we say, game coming up in midweek, we've got to get back on the horse. And I don't think it's a disastrous result. I think it's probably a fair one.
I think the game hinged on the red card. I think that's where it came to. I know we were struggling at that point, but when you're pushing as well as we were right at the end of the second half, things like just finish it for you. And even with 10 men, we looked really good at the end. And just with the extra body, I think would have definitely taken something from that game. But look, last week, the final game against Derby midweek, it was like a routine win. That's what we spoke of last week. And I think it felt more like a routine defeat. It felt like Preston outplayed us. And to be fair, it's all right going in, as we're a Town podcast, so we mainly concentrate about Town, but realistically yesterday, some games you win, some games you lose, some games you gifted them by poor opposition play, and then some other games you just deservedly beaten by a team that's better coached than you are. And that's what happened yesterday. Preston changed their formation 20 minutes before the start of the game based on the team sheet that we put out. That's the confidence Neil has with his team, and it showed. They played us better than I think anyone else has this season. I felt they outplayed us. First 15 minutes we started really well, really well. Campbell's clinical finish. He had a lot to do when that ball came in. He's slower now than he was before, but he managed to hold the defender off. And I still thought the goalkeeper was going to get there before him, and he managed to put it in the back of the net. I think between the keeper's legs. That's clinical finishing for a striker that over the last 12 months or 18 months now, he hasn't been very clinical. But that seems to have changed this season under this new approach. And that's good. The first 15 minutes were fine, and then Preston settled into their new formation pretty well after the first 15 minutes, and I felt they controlled it. I thought Bacuna went missing. He's been good last couple of games, but again, in games where you've got to dig it out a little bit, sometimes he can be a bit of a luxury. Doesn't throw himself about a bit, gets a little bit... He looks petulant the way he plays. It's not necessarily lazy, but just his behaviour just...
He is
lazy. He is lazy. It doesn't seem synonymous with the way Corbyn is trying to get us to play, or how I think he's trying to get us to play. And then the 50 minutes after half-time, the first 50 minutes of a game and the second 15 minutes after half-time don't usually correlate to the rest of the game. It's really frantic, and the game changes based on what's been said at half-time, and we were just unfortunate. The first 50, we could have been 2 or 3-0 up after the first 50 minutes in this game. We weren't. We were 1-0 up. We didn't put the game to bed. And in the second 15 minutes after half-time, Preston did. That they won the game at that point. The first goal, Bacuna was at fault. Again, just not tracking, and that's a behavioural, not a talent issue, but a mental issue when it comes to that. And for the second goal, I am 100% with Cam. I can't blame Ben Hamer for that, because he has to have called. He has to have called for that. And Naby Sarr's not got out of his way. And that is an error when it comes to centre-back play, as bad as passing it across your goal, which maybe not necessarily is the case anymore, and also passing it back to the centre of the goal when you're giving it back to the keeper. And Naby Sarr seems to do all three of those things quite regularly. It's very quickly becoming apparent the type of player that Naby Sarr is. He has quite a high floor, I think, in that he's always going to be a higher League One player and a lower Championship player. His abilities are, or his lack of abilities, is covered a lot by athleticism, in that he's big and he's fast and he's pretty powerful. So if he does make an error, there's a lot of times he can get back and stop anything coming from a mistake that he's made. But for me, the sending off's 100% of red card. He's been beaten there, and he's grabbed him. It's not something you choose to do in that point. That's just something that naturally happens. If a striker's in front of you, you know he's away, you grab him. You grab him every day of the week, and unfortunately, it's a red card. It is a red card. Potts in the first half, or in the second half, people are questioning whether that should have been a sending off. He went in 1-footed, but what happens is halfway through the tackle, you can see him pull 1 foot out, and he ends up kind of clattering into Campbell with both feet a little bit. But that's only because he tried to remove himself from the tackle. Not a red card for me. That's a yellow card. He's made a distinct effort to try and remove himself and Campbell from danger. It was just a high-intensity crash that happens in this level of football. Pippa, again, is our main man going forward. He's what we are. Huddersfield Pippa, that's what we are at the moment. If he's on fire and getting things going up front, then we've got a chance. And it's nice to see him, because we thought he might have been struggling with an injury after the last game, but we got that one wrong in that it's Toffolo. Toffolo was heavily strapped yesterday with blue tape on his right knee, and I don't think I'd noticed that in games before yesterday. Karoma's dropped to the bench, and I can only believe that's anything to do with conditioning. It can't be form, because he's brilliant. When he came on yesterday, the first thing he does is puts in Pippa, who crashes on outside the right-hand post. Already the injuries are telling, and conditioning is becoming more and more of an issue. And I think that game yesterday was just too much for us after the effort we've been putting in recently. And to turn it around again in another few days for a midweek game this week coming up, it's going to be a tough ask for Town to turn it around. But it's not one to overreact from yesterday. It's one of those games where it just didn't go our way, whereas against Derby, it did go our way. Everything against Swansea went our way. For once, it hasn't, and that's going to happen over the course of the season. Onwards and upwards.
Yeah, definitely. No, I sort of agree with a lot of that there. I think that game were there to be won against Preston, and like I said, they were just a bit, I like to say, cuter. They're just a bit cuter in how they played, in terms of the man marking, just sort of the dirty work. Once they got that lead, You know, they did what a lot of clever Championship sides do, and they just sort of tighten up, sit deep, draw fouls, and they were just cuter. They were cleverer. On my notes here, I've got Sarr is the new Sodji. Bacuna still hasn't grown up. Why is Coburn wearing white trainers? Yeah, there's a lot of doodles and random things. But yeah, Sarr, I mean, he is like Sodji, isn't he? He reminds me of Sodji in terms of he's got moments of brilliance, and then all of a sudden he does something completely, you know, stupid. I think he's been a good addition, but like I say, like what you said, Ian, he's not of that calibre of Championship centre back that you need. But I think he's been doing quite well. In all honesty, he was at fault, in my opinion, for the second goal from Preston. I think it's one of them, you know, people with a footballing brain, whether you play football or you don't, you know, when it comes down to communication between defenders and goalkeepers, you know, you see it time and time again when a ball's floated in from whatever angle, the keeper might call it, but the defender will decide to get there first, and he'll hit it into the stands, and you think, fair play to you, you've stepped up and you've made that decision. On the other hand, a ball might get floated in, you know, and the defender calls it, and the keeper gets there first and makes that decision. Yeah, you know, yesterday, neither of them made the decision. Like I say, we haven't got mics hooked up, but we would assume that Hamer gave the call, and Sarr just stood there like an ornament and got in the way, and ultimately it was a nice, clever little finish over the top. But that just
the thing is there, OT, though, there's no one in the stadium. So, like, if the stadium is full and the goalie's made a shout, the defender's got an excuse and say, I didn't know where it came from, I don't know who did it. But there's no one in the stadium. There's just the players. So any call should be very, very clear. So the blame for the goal should be very clear to everybody. Everybody should be aware who's at fault for that.
And Hamer's come in for a lot of stick recently, and I think that he's making real improvements. I think he still just makes me a little bit nervous how long he holds onto the ball with them pass backs. But he made some brilliant saves yesterday. He seems to be growing in confidence and kind of showing why he's been at clubs like Derby. So yeah, they were the better team in the end. We didn't come out in the second half at all, which was really disappointing to see in terms of, like, you know, putting it to Preston and the sending off completely killed it. But I'm just thinking back, the last time I was on the podcast was we're in trouble, and I had a little listen on my way home from work, and you know, we were so sort of tired and bored of the kind of football that we were playing at town, and really worried. And that was obviously, you know, beckoning the survival of the Championship last season. And if you look at the football we're playing now, I think it's you know, it's polar opposites. We're playing good attacking football. It's fluent. You know, we're pulling the fullbacks and the wingers or the wing backs, whatever formation the opposition's playing, we're pulling them out wide and then sneaking it into them little channels. It's beautiful to see, to be honest. And I don't mind losing if we're playing like that.
I'm going to just put this, because it is in my notes. How do you solve a problem like Juninho Bacuna? Because anyone who's seen him warming up in front of the South Stand sees someone who's a bit like the fat kid in PE, who's just, you know, trying to get away with doing as little as he possibly can. I said as the fat kid in PE, but you know, his work rate and ethic when he wants to, and you saw that with the goal that he scored against Derby. When he wants to put it in, he'll run the length of the pitch if he can do. But how do you get the best out of him every single week? And that's the biggest question that we've got to answer, because there's only so many times you can keep having this same issue talked about, and he's done this quite a few times before you start looking, can we get, you know, Rangers were interested. Is there a better option out there for Huddersfield Town Football Club in this style of play? Because it's getting to that point now where I'm just a little bit bored of the petulance within Juninho Bacuna's play.
I think it's a difficult one because, okay, he's 23 years old, and there's a fellow 23-year-old. You can kind of say that he's a young player still, and okay, young players mature at different speeds, but he's not going to be a young player for very much longer, and you can't make a career out of having potential. And he's got bags of that. Nobody is disputing it. You can see that he's got craft and he's got skill, and he has got that ability to make things happen out of seemingly nothing, but he doesn't do it anywhere near as consistently as he should be. And okay, it looks as if, and I'm sure we'll get onto this more in the rest of the episode, but we can very much say that Carlos, the consensus is that he's getting more out of players than they've had before. We heard about what Benza was saying post-match last week in his interview about how much how well he's responded to Carlos's method of coaching. But if you have an excellent manager like Carlos, who an experienced one as well, who's worked especially with youth players in youth setups, if he can't get the best out of him, I don't see who's going to be able to. I mean, I don't know the approach that's going to work best with him, if I'm honest. He doesn't need telling how good he is, because he knows that. You can see from his play. And if anything, I think he overestimates it sometimes with his flicky and flashy back heels. When really the basics is what's needed 80% of the time in these games. Games are turned on a moment of flair, not pointless flair for 40 minutes that loses your possession. So I don't know. I hope that Carlos has a plan with him. I hope that the fact that we've got a youth coach in a senior job will help, because if there's a sort of demographic that he can get the most out of, it's going to be a young Juninho Bacuna, just in the way that we hope that, say, Wagner might be able to get best out of Sobi. That didn't happen, and I hope this isn't going to be the same case. He's offered us way more than Sobi ever will have done, but he's not going to go down as a good young player, a good signing. And these are formative years of his career now. He does need to book his ideas up a little bit. That's the problem. And so people will run out of patience with him. It's frustrating, and he buys himself more time with great performances, but that doesn't happen week in, week out. He'll pluck out one a month, and that'll silence a few critics. But he's not going to get away with that for much longer, I don't feel. He is frustrating to watch, and it is the work rate. It's the effort, and that is the single easiest thing to improve on. But only he can do that. It's not that it's a facet of his game in particular that needs improving, his passing, his finishing, his control, whatever. He doesn't need to get loads fitter. He needs to apply himself more. And so I question just how much a coach can instill that in someone.
Oh, look, if Bacuna was the finished article, he wouldn't be at Town. He'd be far too good for us. If he was as consistent as you want players to be, he has all the talents to play at the very highest level. He's that good. When he wants to be that good, or when the game suits his game, he's that good. It's really tough with him because players like that need arrogance. They need arrogance to have the confidence to be able to take players on. And you can look through the divisions and you'll find players like that. There's Ozil at Arsenal, similar type of guy, obviously 10 times better, but same effect. If the game's flat track bullies, if the game goes in their favour, they turn up and they show a little bit, and the cherry on top that wins games when games are easier. Last year he came in, he had a little partnership with Diakabi for a few weeks that it seemed to pick him up, and he was great for a little while. Then as soon as something's not quite perfect, he just I don't know, he's off the boil a little bit. I don't know what the answer is with him. And do you know what? I don't think you can get it, and I don't think he'll get the answer at Huddersfield Town. I don't think he will. I think the ego
in the squad, aren't we?
It's just the ego, Goatee. And that's not a bad thing, because I think for that attacking midfielder role, maybe not an ACM, but you have to have a little bit of it. You have to be able to take those risks. But when the risks don't work, you can't disappear game after game after game, and that's the issue. When it doesn't work, it looks like he's having a temper tantrum, and he might, and that's not saying he is doing that, but it looks like he is. It looks like that to fans, and that gets fans on his back. That's a really big issue, because players feel stuff when they're on the field. When you're on the field, you know what the vibe is from the stadium, and he doesn't help himself with the way he carries himself. And last year when he got sent off against Forest late on, at that point I said on here that I'd had enough. Not that my opinion's worth anything, but at that point it just was the perfect example of the petulance of a young player that plays with a certain type of style and approach to the game that probably needs to learn a little bit. And when he does learn a little bit, his consistency will improve. I think it's a double-edged sword. He's arrogant. He plays in that way. When things don't go his way, he kind of has a bit of an issue with it. And then if he didn't, and he just concentrated on playing, he'd be twice the player he is, and he wouldn't be at a club like Town. He'd be at a Premier League, or he'd be somewhere else in Europe in a top division, not in a Championship league that's a Championship team that's aiming for mid-table at best. So he'll sort himself out. But I think he's got to sort himself out for him, not for us, not for the town, not for performances with us, but for his own career, because he has stuff that other people don't have. He can create chances, and it is the hardest position to impress at. If you're a striker and you score goals, it's there, it's written. You've banged 20 in, you can score. Grant played left wing. How many people said he did nothing but score? Still went for 15 million, because if you're scoring 18, 19 goals, no one cares what else you do. You're contributing points directly through goals. If you're attacking midfielder, you don't get the same amount of goals to get moves like that. You have to offer consistency as well as creativity, just like Aaron Moy did. Bacuna has every ability to be at that level that Moy was, just doesn't have the consistency. And how he gets there, it beats me. In my years of playing football, I've not really seen players that kind of have that issue and go up. Normally they kind of disappear. With Michael Collins at Town for years, Bacuna just, again, 3-4 times a player. Collins was the same type of thing. They could do things, but for 2-3 games in a row, then they do nothing.
A bit like Van La Parra as well, isn't it? A similar kind of player as well, a bit of a flair player, bit hit and miss. But I work in behaviour, and I think he needs a bit of 2-to-1, we call it. 2 members of staff to 1 with Bacuna. He needs a few laps around Leeds Road playing fields for me, or he needs to get up Castle Hill steps or Saddleworth steps or something like that. You see what Carlos Corberan has brought some of the players forward, though, hasn't he? Hoggy looks a little bit more capable again. He seems to be sort of keeping the ball moving. Karoma, can't believe how well he's doing. When we first signed him, we were kind of thinking, oh God, it's another lad from lower league that we're going to try and sprinkle some magic dust over, and he's going to go for less money than we bought him for. And he's come on a long way, hasn't he? So he hopefully can do it with Bacuna.
I wish I knew. I do think there is a player in there. I think we all do. It's just how you get it out of him. I'm not sure how. Going into these next few games, we've picked up on the squad element, but Naby Sarr is suspended. Who plays in defence? Do we go with Schindler and Stearman, or do we go 3 at the back? Because it seems to me we do need some pace at the back. Naby Sarr's not the quickest, but he's definitely quicker than what we have. So you'd assume that Critchlow will come in, and we probably go 5 at the back again, because it seems to be the best formation for Huddersfield Town Football Club with the players that we have at the minute.
Well, I think it's interesting to look at the opposition we're coming up against in midweek. Obviously, we've got Birmingham, who have really struggled so far this season. They've scored 3 goals in all competitions. They've not won since opening day. Their strikers haven't actually scored a goal between them. That's a big problem for Lucas Jutkovic and Scott Hogan. They're yet to bag. So perhaps Naby's absence won't be quite as significant. Although you could argue on yesterday's show, and he might not be as missed quite as much as beforehand. But okay, they line up in a 5-3-2, and there's not a great chance for us being overrun in the centre of the park. You know what I mean? However, they are going to be hard to break down because they've only conceded 4. So I'm wondering, do we commit 5 to defence? I know that the greatest outlet is going forward, of course, with his fullbacks, and you're hoping that they're both still fit after a gap of 4 days. Then hopefully that's what we'll go with again. But do we go with 5 at the back, or do we switch to a 4, knowing that we're not up against the biggest goal threat in the division? We probably do need to pile more at them. Do we go for an extra man in the middle of the park? But one thing's for certain, for me, whatever shape we line up with, I'd like probably to see Critchlow come back in a little bit again. This is the time to be rotating players. This is a game where we're fancied. We're certainly going into the game as favourites. I'm not advocating that he plays full out 90 minutes, etc. But if we're going to be focusing on youth, which is very clearly the policy this year, then those young players need to be having game time in meaningful fixtures. This is certainly a meaningful fixture, and there's certainly an opening now to bring him into the side. So yeah, Naby's gone. I would certainly like to see Critchlow playing some part, just to, again, it's adding experience in crucial games, and that might suit as well. I don't want him to be called upon, say, in 3 weeks' time when he's not featured, at all properly. I'd want to see him brought in probably from the start, purely just to add to a bit more experience. Yeah.
Got to be Critchlow, hasn't it? He's got to come in. We've tried Stearman and Schindler times before, so many times before, and it just doesn't work. He's pretty awful, actually. And just bringing Sarr in straight away, the team looked different. Even with Critchlow playing the first few games, we looked all right. We looked okay at the back. It looked so much better than last year, where Stearman looked like he was ready to go to the glue yard. He looked like he were absolutely done, but he's had a nice little change of haircut. He looks like a medieval prince now, a bit like Uhtred of Bebenberg, or rocking something pretty cool. I don't know where he's been to get his hair sorted out, but he looks banging compared to what he did. And with his hair, his abilities have improved too. He looks really good at the moment.
Stearman, sorry, he's doing like little Cruyff turns and stuff. Have you seen him?
He looks a different player. He might have eaten a bit of meat.
He's growing out his powers. It's absolutely spot on.
I think he's gone on the paleo. He's gone on the paleo diet. He must have U-turned from veganism to a bit more meat or something, because
over now.
He looks great. No, he looks fantastic. And he, to me, going into this season, I thought Schindler was the A player. I thought he was our better defender. It's not, is it? Stearman's been head and shoulders above him this year, and that's why Stearman started this weekend. I think we're going to be going with the 5 at the back, or the 3 at the back, the 3 centre backs, because I don't believe Corbyn went into the season wanting to play that. But this is how much faith I have in him now. In that, I reckon he's noticed that the fullbacks are our best attacking outlet. So we're changing everything around to allow them to bomb on more. And against a team that don't concede many, but that they don't score many, the challenge will be to try and score anything. So they'll be trying to make it so our fullbacks bang on again, as they have done in the most recent games. Like, I think yesterday there was a graphic where it showed how many players typically touch the ball where on the field. And Campbell was basically on the centre spot. That's where most of his touches were. But right next to him were Toffolo and Pippa. They were that far upfield for most of the game. And that was in a game where I didn't really feel like we pressed very well. And we must have been something totally wild in the previous couple of games. So now we'll chuck 3 at the back, I hope, with Critchlow for the little bit of pacey cover. But everything's about getting the fullbacks into the game as much as possible, because they're the game winners. They lopside the game so much. It's so difficult tracking them, because when they go, they don't just go with medium pace, do they? They are fast guys. They are gone, and they don't just overlap. They underlap. They run diagonals. Sometimes you're seeing them on the opposing wing. That they have been given free roam when they go forward. And now defensive units hate that. They absolutely hate, because you normally have an assignment, right? He's my guy. Again, Preston played a 3-5-2 against us, so the wingers will be marking the wingers. That's kind of the fullbacks versus the fullbacks. That's what that tries to create. Not all teams can manage it as well as Preston can. So when you're one-on-one, there are assignments given to the defenders to follow certain attackers. The way we play makes that impossible. And you have to swap to a zonal defence, and now not all teams will be used to that. Birmingham conceding 4. They sound like they're pretty decent at the back, but we'll give them a test they've not had before. And I think from looking at them play the last couple of games as well, I think the way we attack will cause them problems. But Critchlow's got to come in. Critchlow, Schindler, and Stearman, and that little bit of agility and ability should just help us a little bit more at the back than just the 2 old, slow cart horses we had to sit through last year for game after game after game anyway.
Yeah, I think Stearman looks brilliant. You know, he's really come on, really sort of, it's like he's sort of adjusted his game. I think he's sort of corrected the mistakes from last season in terms of finding himself sort of flat-footed and on the turn, and he's given himself a bit more space. Schindler, just to sort of talk on Schindler, I've got to air some concerns with Schindler and what a player he's been for us, you know. But I just think that maybe he's not match fit, is he? He hasn't been playing enough as of late. So match fitness and game time might get him back to somewhere near where we'd like him to be. So only time will tell with Schindler. But I think he looked out of place yesterday, and it might be some might not agree, but if you think a lot of the balls that were coming into Stearman, he's getting it down on the ground quickly. He's using Hamer, he's using the triangles, and they're sort of building them attacking sequences again. And when it gets to Schindler, boom, it's up in air, you know, and he's just hoofing it. And I don't know, it just didn't look to fit the kind of football that we're blossoming into now. And I don't know if he's going to be kind of left behind a little bit. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I love him. I invented the invisible Schindler shrine all them years ago.
No, I love him as well, but
he's been my background on my phone for a very long time because he's a sexy, sexy man. But I felt at the end of last season it should. T. I've actually got that myself. I've replaced Delroy Facey
I'm a
as my.
I'm a fair critic. For the listeners, I'm just showing the wallpaper that my brother Peter O'Toole did of Christopher Schindler.
And I tell you what, we'll retweet it this week if you're listening. So again, so you can get it on. And I've actually got that on my phone as well, but you can't see because if I turn my camera off, my shitty Wi-Fi will go down. But I love Christopher Schindler to bits, but I did feel at the end of last season, I think if he'd left, it would have been the end of a brilliant era, and it would have been a nice goodbye. But then again, you look at last weekend, he made the most interceptions any centre half has made this season. That player's still in there. I think you're right. Where does he fit in with Carlos Corberán? Because you know, Richard Stearman, he came in, he made an instant impact, and he had a bad period of form. But you got to remember, Richard Stearman's played at a lot higher level than Chris Schindler ever has done. He's played a lot more in the Premier League. He's played England under-21s. He was at Wolves for years. He's been a solid, not better than a solid, really good Championship bottom-end kind of Premier League player. He's played at right back and centre back. So he's got that ability to do that. And I do wonder where Shindy sits in. I think if we're playing free at the back, Shindy gets in every day of the week. But for a four-man defence and the way we want to be progressing, and this is for the next 3 or 4 transfer windows, we'll be looking at getting an upgrade on Schindler and Sarr if we're going to make the leap from being a bottom 6 championship club to be a top half championship club. So I love him, but I have that gut feeling that you have. You just think it's coming to the end of that time together. I say it like he's like a special person in my life. I've never met the man, but I bloody well love him. So that's me. It'll be sad to see him go whenever he goes, but I just don't know where he fits in at the minute.
Sorry, Greg. I listened to Paul Parker. We're doing Man U legend Paul Parker. We're doing an interview on TalkSport this weekend, and he was saying it was kind of a spin on like the sort of brilliant black defenders that we've had over the years. There's been some amazing defenders there, and he was talking about Des Walker in particular, and he was kind of saying where do the Des Walkers fit in the modern game? And it's quite sad because they are fading out, aren't they? And I think Schindler's one of them. Sometimes it is a case of just putting your laces through the ball, being a leader and clearing your lines. But in the sort of modern total football, it doesn't quite fit. So it's quite sad that them defenders are fading out now.
No, Shindy did that. You look at the Premier League, and this is now turned into my shrines reappearing in the corner of my bedroom. But you think about the times he was there, he was sliding on the ball, he was just doing the simple things right. It's what you need. But you're right, we are going towards Corber ball, whatever you want to call it, total football, this new style of football. Not sure quite where he fits, and Naby Sarr's coming in and made an instant impact. 80% good, 20% bad. So it's going to be an interesting development where we go, especially in the next year with transfers, which we'll come to very quickly. But I think it's only right that we get away from my shrine of Christopher Schindler. I'll save that for half an hour when we finish recording. To the predictions for midweek. I think 0-0 will be probably what we're looking at here. Birmingham, you mentioned it, Cam. Jutkiewicz, let's forget him. Nobody likes him around these parts. But Scott Hogan's an amazing talent and banged a lot of goals in at this level for Brentford and for Villa. It's going to be tough to keep, but I just have 0-0. It's got 0-0 for me written all over this.
I think it's one we're going to have to really grind out. I think we thought that we earmarked the Preston game for being a difficult one to watch. I think this is the one that's going to be less appealing on the eyes. However, I back us to bounce back. I believe now in the way that we've been playing on balance over the last few weeks, if the individual errors are cut out from this weekend, I would have us in the driving seat. So I'm going to say we sneak a 1-0 win again. I'm going to put a little Fraser Campbell label next to that goal as well. But yeah, I'm confident enough for this one. I think a draw, then again, yeah, maybe I'd probably be happy with that, actually. I think that I don't want us to go and see us fall to back-to-back defeats, but we're in a really busy part of the calendar now. And no, I'd certainly take that. However, yeah, I'm looking at it from a confident angle and definitely with the optimism of a few unbeaten games behind us. I'm going to say we edge it 1-0.
I think we owe everybody a formal apology anyway from the last prediction we all made, where we all said we were going to win, and then we got.
No, we didn't.
By
No, we didn't. I didn't say that.
You don't count that, Greg. You're miserable, Greg. You're miserable. We could win 50 games in a row, and you still say we'll lose the next one.
Yes, because I'm a realist.
Oh, really? Sorry, forgot. But worse than that, Andy Kay, Adam Roberts both put money on Town to win, and now come on, any Town fan who puts money on Town to win, you're done. The game's over. We've lost. We've lost at that moment. So there's two people I blame for that defeat. So as long as no one puts money on Town to win in the game coming up, I'm backing this for a 1-0 win as well, Cam. I think
sent a lot of gamblers to rehab over the years.
You don't bet on Town. You never bet on Town. Come on, guys.
No,
I find it acceptable. I find it acceptable to bet against Town.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we love Town enough that it never falls into that category where you're like, oh well, I hope I lose because I want to win. No, that never happens, right? We're all proper Town fans. I'd rather lose money and Town win.
But it softens the blow, doesn't it? You know, when sometimes what was the inevitable happens, and I've got
that's it. I can cry into my £5 bet that I put on. Yeah, Carlos. It's cost me 25 quid a ticket, but I can. I'll take £5 back on the bet against them. So yeah, Birmingham going to beat us 1-0. Adam Clayton's going to score 90th minute winner because that's what happens against Town every time, isn't it? When we've got an ex-player against us, they always turn up. Apart from Jutskovic, I don't think he's ever put in a good performance against us.
Yeah,
so,
I'm going to go for a 2-0 win. Karoma and Pippa.
Just don't put money on it.
As long as Adam Roberts and Andy Kay don't put money on it, we're laughing. Nice one, guys.
It's like a 43 game unbeaten run. I think for the last 15 games of that, I was putting a £5 on Town to lose every single time. I was down a lot of money, that's for sure. Right, we'll move on from that, and it's on to the big decisions. We had our podcast last week, which went out a bit later than we normally do because we waited on the Examiner interview with Phil Hodgkinson, and there was a lot of contradictions in that, which if you really want to know what we felt about that, it was middle of the road. Phil's gone on Radio Leeds yesterday. I must admit I did not know anything about it. As soon as the game finished, the radio was off, and Strictly Come Dancing, I was preparing for that because there's nothing better than Strictly on a Saturday night. Phil's come out, and to be fair to him, he's open and honest. I think they've got the memo, which listen, we've been probably the most critical, and we've probably had the most shit on social media for calling the club out for it. But if it means that we have a better relationship with the club, I think it needs to be done. He's gone on Radio Leeds. He said some interesting things. The big point being, and Ian alluded to this in our pre-podcast chat, was he getting all the big decisions right. There's a very, very strong argument for that, actually. He made a big call to bring in the Cowleys. He sacked the Cowleys to perhaps because he couldn't back him as he had promised. But he's brought in Carlos, who I think we're all behind on the ball. The big decisions off it, as Carlos been properly backed. I put it on Twitter yesterday. I felt that with this type of football, there's only so long that a coach or a manager can get the most out of a team before he will be on the chairman's door or the CEO's door banging on it going, I need this, and this. Because otherwise there'll be someone from another club going, well, I can give you that, and that. That's his next big ask as a chairman. But what did you make of the interview? Because like I said, it's good to have this drip feed of communication from the club once again.
Well, I thought it was a step in the right direction. I've listened to this probably the most recently of all. I listened to it in panic just as we were about to record this podcast for having missed it when it came out. Yeah, do you know? I think again we've been very critical of Phil and his setup at times. I think we've praised what needs to be praised, but we've certainly been of the opinion that a lot could have been changed and done differently. However, I'll happily say that listening to that, there was a lot of good in it. I do think there were contradictions in there as well. I'm not going to lie, and I'll mention some of them. But a lot of interesting points made too. But to go to the one that you've just mentioned, Greg, about the 100% of the big decisions being right. Do you know? Okay, it looks like he's got the Corberan decision right, which you could say is the biggest decision of all. It was a gamble to get rid of the Cowleys. That looks to be paying dividends right now. Okay, I got him in the first place as well, which undoubtedly saved our season. However much of a hand in transfers he has, he's made some good ones. We've got Pieper, who's looking strong. Carol Lighting is looking a real talent in the middle of the park. However, in that sentence again, there's another contradiction. Did he not come out in the Stephen Chicken interview and say that, you know, he got the Paddy Power call wrong? And, you know, that was the shirt sponsorship, okay, for last season. But then he said that it's had a knock-on effect for this season's sponsorship deals. And obviously we've lost out on getting one from the gambling companies that make up the vast majority of championship shirt sponsors. So I would call that a big decision. And he says, okay, he got that one wrong. But if I'm not going to take him too literally on his 100%, then okay, I think we can move on from that. Again, there was a lot of mention of saying what Carlos wants, what Carlos needs when talking about January, etc. I hope that's not lip service. I hope that genuinely that's going to be listened to, and that we're going to be okay if we're putting money aside for the future and we're banking the Carling grant money as it comes in, then okay, we'll be able to spend. And what Carlos wants, which I take to mean surely fullbacks, given the style of football we play and how thin on the ground we are in those areas, I would like to see that followed through on. I wonder if we might see someone else through the door on a free transfer between now and then. I know he said it's very dependent on the football. I still have problems with some of the things that were mentioned about Rolando Aaron's deal, though, if I'm honest, and saying about the strength of the squad. He doesn't think we have a weaker first 16 or first 18 than last season. I'm sure we'll all have his opinions on this, but mine, well, look, we've lost 60% of our goals from last year. We've lost Emile Smith-Rowe, who we were always going to lose, but have we replaced that? No. Jonas Lossell, second goalkeeper, very sturdy pair of hands. We now have one sturdy enough pair of hands and one that we don't know much of. So I don't know. It was good to see that there was a bit of a dialogue. I like to see an actual interview come out, a bit back and forth. I thought Augie asked some good questions. So yeah, more of that I very much like to see, and fair play. It was nice to have an open conversation. The invitation to come on here is still well and truly open, as I'm sure we will all attest. But no, for me, still some problems in there with it. But no, it was a good sign, and I was pleased to hear some of that.
I thought we were really good. I think Phil's been away in communications rehab to improve his interviewing techniques, because he's been banging. He was good. He was really good. He came across quite. It felt honest and truthful. It felt we have been as guilty as anyone for reading into everything the club has said recently and over the last 6 months, because they've not said very much. And now it's like it's a bit like the ooh la la. We've been spoilt for choice in that we've had 4 interviews in the past 2 to 3 weeks, with it being 2 national media and now one with the Examiner and one with Radio Leeds. And I thought the majority of it was actually pretty good. He was waxing lyrical about the Cowleys, about the Corberan. There's a little slip in there, because he said exactly the same thing about the Cowleys when they joined. When they came in, he spoke non-stop about how wonderful it was to bring them in and how the visions were blah, 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 blah. So I'm not buying into that just yet. What you do take from that is that he said something on the lines of the 10 games, in that we'll judge where we are after the 10 games, and we've got no real target in where we want to finish it for the end of the season. We're just going to 10 games in. We don't want to be looking over our shoulder at relegation, but we want to imprint the identity of Carlos and what the club wants. And that's great, as long as you're above that looking over the shoulder. I don't know quite what that limit is, but we've still got 3 more games. I think 4 games left in this little tiny concentrated patch of games, and we'll see where we are at that point. But it could go anywhere. If players get injured, we might be down at the bottom. If we win a couple, we'll be flying high. So it's going to be fun to be able to look back after 10, 11 games and see exactly where we are and compare that to what Phil wanted. So that's actually good for us, because we've now got something qualitative to compare the club's expectations to what Corberan's actually providing on the field and in regards to points gained. I can't mention the 16 to 18 squad players in that Phil reckons, okay, they're better than they were last year. That's okay. Say it's 18. Let's give him 18. The only problem there is the 4 missing are ASR, Grant, Mounier and Willock. And I'm not a massive Willock fan, but you look at how many goals we're missing from there. We've downgraded on all those 4 players. And at the moment, we've found a better way to create goals from deep, from fullbacks, from midfielders. Fantastic, great, lovely. But you still need your strikers to dig in. Luckily, Campbell has been so clinical, and if that continues, we won't have a problem. Koroma, his goal last week was phenomenal. The composure he showed, to put in a little fake shot and then drag it back across the face of goal is top quality. That's Grantesque, that finish. We didn't really speak of that much last week, but that was as good. That was something you could see Carlin doing. That's exactly that type of goal that he'd have pulled out. It was great. Fortunately, he's not conditioned well enough, so he maybe struggled to start this weekend, and we really did pay for it until he came on at the end. But no, well done to the club on that one. I don't know what has changed, but Phil's approach to it has definitely improved. I think he mentioned throughout that DTS was looking at him a little bit funny when he started talking of something. So I think it's a little bit it's well structured for him to be able to speak well and come across well to us, because I thought it was good. He did say one other thing, that in regards to he's made 100% right decision when it comes to big decisions. He said when he came into the club, he'd never seen anybody so down in regard to the players looking absolutely demotivated, into the dumps, right? And then the next breath, he said, we need a full squad reset. There was a lot of fans last summer, the summer we were relegated from Premier League, screaming that the club required a huge turnover in players because the confidence issues built and destroyed in the Premier League would really suffer in regards to the success of the club throughout our first season in the Championship last year. They didn't do it. The club didn't do it. And now we're cutting costs. Now we're selling Congolo for a little bit more than 4 million, according to Phil on the interview. So now we're cutting costs. Now we're trying to get rid of players, not necessarily for what they're worth, but just to get them off the book so we can try and rebuild. We should have done this 12 months ago. And that was under Phil's purview. Since then, it's been better. Ruthlessness has been great. I like ruthlessness in a chairman because you need it. If things are not going right, change something. You have to change something. And he's got Corbyn right.
Fair point. I don't want to say the word because it's a Gary Monk word, but it just needs a little bit more humility, doesn't it, from the club? And the interview and examiner showed that it was a very defensive interview, and he just needs to say, "Listen, we got it wrong." I think those words were in there, but it was the way that they were said. It was like, "Oh, we've been an open club, etc., etc., etc." When a guy on Twitter can make a 20-odd thread about every single thing you've done and they've gone against you, I think they just need to reset and go, actually, there's a better way of doing this. And there are permutations to this. You got fans not in grounds. There's the growing ever disconnect, which could be linked to that, but I'm not entirely sure it is. I think it goes from 3 seasons worth. We had the 3-year anniversary at the weekend of Town beating Man United. It was a very good birthday for me back in the day. But after that, for 3 years, we've pretty much gone through every single emotion bar elation. And as football fans, that kind of wears you down. So yeah, I think I'm happy to hear that dialogue, and it'd be nice to hear it on not on a weekly basis, which some people would want, but just a regular basis, because the club have got to keep us engaged, because there is a real risk. I mean, let's be honest, we're not going to be going back into a football ground this season, so you've got to keep us on the hook probably until next day, August. I think April at the earliest, but there you go. I'm not a virologist or whatever. I'm just a simpleton who has an opinion like everyone else. Finally, it's why Sean's on. No more Smile a While, which is very disappointing. I used to enjoy reading it when it was distributed around the Vulcan back in the day. A lovely, can I just say, a lovely little statement that you popped out on Twitter the other day, which you can go see at Smile a While Zine on Twitter. But nice little collaboration with HTSA. It's been a good couple of years, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been really good. One of my most enjoyable projects to date. Sad that it's coming to an end, to be honest, but I think it's the right decision. It's a labour of love doing a fanzine. It's a very sort of underground culture, so to speak, in the footballing world of England, and it's great that there's still people out there, many clubs around West Yorkshire and England, that are doing these fanzines and putting blood, sweat and tears into these little pieces of paper. So yeah, I've done 13 printed issues, I think 3 or 4 podcasts. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Andy Booth, John Dyson, Rodney Rowe, Alan Sweeney, and Andy Thackeray, John Stead, Ian Dunn, Gary Roberts, Danny Schofield, Rob Edwards, and Peter Jackson. So for me, that list, I'm happy with that list. I can retire on that list. But yeah, no, there's still plenty of things in the pipeline. Jim Chisholm, I'm sure a few lads will know Jim is jobbed me already to be part of the Huddersfield Town Heritage Project. So I'm still going to be very much around the club and doing some good things. But yeah, the fanzine is no longer.
Any favourite interviews out of all of them? I mean, I remember watching the couple that you did. I think the Jacko one is in a highlight for me. Just available on SoundCloud still, I believe, if that's right. But yeah, what were your favourite interviews from those times?
There's plenty. John Steads, I really enjoyed John Steads because if you think he's been such a journeyman in the sport, and you know he played under Graham Souness, he played under Mark Hughes, obviously was part of the youth that came through that great youth setup, Peter Jackson, and John Steads was really interesting because he obviously went to the Premier League really quickly and then didn't really have the delights that he expected and was relegated and part of them kind of clubs that were struggling to keep the head above water, but it was playing under sort of former legendary footballers. So that was really interesting. Who else? Rob Edwards was brilliant. We did that podcast at my brother's studio at Bates's Mill in Huddersfield, and he came and sat down and we did an hour, and he would have given me another hour. You know, what a lovely bloke he is. Rob Edwards, just talking about his upbringing, sort of playing for Stockport and Crewe, going through the Crewe youth setup, doing his YTA, and then coming over the hill to Huddersfield and actually settling in Huddersfield in Home Firth. That was a great interview. Boothie was probably, you can't beat Andy Booth, can you? I mean, he has always been my hero from when I first got a season ticket, I think it was 96-97 season, or 97-98, one or other. And I was working in a school at the time, and I had an all-star lineup in my year group. There was Earl Crabtree's daughter, John Dyson's daughter, Andy Booth's son, Andy Thackeray's son, and it went on and on and on. So I thought, this is a brilliant time. So I got Andy Booth's name off the school system, and I rang him off the back of an attendance call. And I got Boothie into school, and I sort of booked out a meeting room, and I've still got the recording. You can hear a bell going off in the background, and he's like, do you need to go, Sean? I'm like, no, we can have another 10. And then when I was signing him out, everyone were getting his autograph, and I'm like, it's all been exposed now. But no, some delightful interviews. Ian Dunn was a good one, talking about his time at Goole and at York, and how he became like a York legend. And then it was a contact via Jimmy Lawson that brought Ian Dunn into town back in the day in the early 90s. So there's loads of things that I would have never known that sort of came through the interviews. So the digital copies are going to be part of the Heritage Project, and I'm going to continue to run the page as like a fan page. So I'm still going to be doing bits and bobs and sort of posting things around and being part of things. But yeah, it's been a good roller coaster.
It's nice that your labour of love's kind of been kept going posthumously by the heritage stuff. So if you want to listen to Sean's stuff, we'll drop the links on our Twitter page. But at Smile a While Zine on Twitter, and yeah, the couple of, I know the Jacko one is definitely on SoundCloud because it's probably one of my favourite interviews to listen to of all, probably the last 5 or 6 years. That so good luck with that, Sean. Thank you very much for coming on. We'll have you back, don't worry. You're not just being brought on for 1 week and thrown to the wayside. We'll make sure Ian keeps you on. Cam, Ian, thank you once again for joining us on a Sunday on this Zoom call. We'll be back sometime soon. Let's hope Town can get some points in that time, because At one point, we were 5th in the as it stands table yesterday, and then at another point, we were solidly in mid-table. Season's going to be very, very interesting. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.